I'm not going to waste your time with an intro. You want to know what the best and worst tracks are in Mario Kart DS. So let's get straight into it with what I consider to be the worst track in Mario Kart DS, which is Choco Island. In other Mario Kart games, it can be tricky to decide which track I think is the worst one, but here in Mario Kart DS, it was a very easy choice to make as nothing works in Choco Island. It looks ugly, there are annoying bumps in the road which aren't fun to go over or try to avoid, there's a huge mud puddle that's not fun to drive through as it kills your speed. The only good thing about this course is that it's over in about 2 minutes. You will realise pretty quickly that the retro selection of tracks within Mario Kart DS is pretty weak overall, mainly due to the technical limitations of the DS's hardware, but Choco Island was terrible on the SNES, and it still remains an awful track on the DS. Figure 8 Circuit. The first track in Mario Kart DS, and this has to be one of the worst introduction tracks in any Mario Kart game. The layout of this track is a simple figure 8 circuit. There are no obstacles on the road. The most interesting thing about this course is that you go under a bridge. And heck, there is literally no Mario theming within it. I don't understand why this course was included in this track roster. It's uninspired, boring, and it does not set a good starting impression for what the tracks are like in Mario Kart DS. Cooper Beach. I gave this track a 3-star rating in my SNES tracks ranking video, and I don't know why. Maybe I was being too generous because I don't think this track is that good on the DS. The beach theming is quite nice, but this track is mind-numbingly boring to race on. It's not a track I'm ever going to go out of my way to pick, and whenever I do race on this track, it's just not very fun. Baby Park. What happened here? I can understand why Baby Park was brought over to the DS, as it's quite a simple track for the DS's limitations, but this track does not work on the DS at all. This track has been heavily downgraded from the original GameCube version, as the lap count has been brought down from 7 to 5 laps. If we compare both versions of the track side by side, we can also see that the DS version of the course has stripped away all of the charm from the original course. The GameCube original had lots of funfair attractions and other things going on in the background, but on the DS, it looks like this track is just set to a generic green forest background. I mean, I understand that there are many more limitations on the DS, but come on man, it just feels so dull here. The huge issue, however, that I have with Baby Park on the DS is that it feels way less chaotic compared to the original GameCube version, which I think completely misses the point of this course. Mario Kart Double Dash had both double item boxes and giant special items, and thanks to these items, the course felt super chaotic whenever you chose to race on it. Here on the DS, there's no chaos whatsoever. Sure, you have shells you have to be careful of, and bananas can stack up on the road, but the course just feels super easy and bland on the DS. Baby Park has been heavily downgraded on the DS, and I honestly hate it being here. Yoshi Falls. If you are heavily nostalgic for Mario Kart DS, then you might be more fond of this track than I am, but I find Yoshi Falls to be a very simple course that isn't that enjoyable to race on. Aside from the boost pads and the waterfalls that can have item boxes flowing down them, there really isn't anything interesting going on here. Banshee Broadwalk. It might seem like I'm being a bit harsh with the placement of this course on my list, but I am really not a fan of Banshee Broadwalk. A spooky theme is always pretty cool in Mario Kart, but here in Banshee Broadwalk, I don't think it's been executed very well, as this track feels kind of bland and bare bones to be honest. The track layout is also something I don't enjoy, as most of the course is pretty narrow and there's lots of sharp turns here too. I usually enjoy a challenging track in Mario Kart, but I just find it to be frustrating in Banshee Broadwalk. But what really turns me off from this course though is the music, as I absolutely hate it. This repetitive eerie piece of music is just so annoying, and I just want to rip my ears off whenever I'm made to listen to it. Am I being too harsh on Banshee Broadwalk? Maybe, but this is just how I feel, as I hate this track. At least one thing I do like is the big cheep cheep you come across. That always makes me laugh. Mario Circuit 1. Onto the 2-star tracks. This is a nice track to include in the retro selection for DS, since this was the first time retro tracks were officially introduced into the series, and Mario Circuit 1 on the SNES is the very first Mario Kart track to ever exist. It is however not a great course to race on, as it's a very simple track with barely any obstacles on the road to avoid. All the SNES courses also used to be 5 laps long, but here on the DS, every SNES track here has been changed to only being 3 laps. It's a change I'm okay with, but all the SNES tracks feel incredibly incredibly short on the DS as a result of it, especially Mario Circuit 1, which can be finished in under a minute. Donut Plains 1. I feel kind of bad putting all the SNES tracks towards the bottom of my list, but I've got to be honest, as the SNES track selection in DS is just really poor. At least Vanilla Lake wasn't picked to be included, as that's the worst course in Mario Kart history. As for Donut Plains 1, I don't have any problems with it, but it's just a very generic course that's easily forgettable. Peach Circuit. This track is fine, not the most interesting, but it's a nice, short and simple track. It's pretty much identical here on DS to the original GBA version, so there isn't anything new on this course, but it's pleasant to race on. Luigi Circuit. Another circuit course that's decent, but there has been one change made which I do want to complain about. On the original GameCube version of this course, there is a part of the track where after doing a 360-degree turn, you'll end up driving back up the same bit of thin road you were just previously on. This can lead you to potentially clashing with other racers head-on if you are either ahead of the pack in first place driving up the road, or if you are in last place driving down the road, you can potentially easily snipe the player in first with a shell. It's a very small part of the course, but I did still like it. So it's a shame that in the DS version of the course, the road has been made a lot wider, so you aren't going to clash with other racers as often. Not sure why this change was made, as I feel like it wasn't really needed. Frappe Snowland. A snow track that I disliked back on the N64, but it's more bearable here on the DS. Previous snow tracks before Mario Kart DS always used to felt super slippy, which made them not fun to race on, but from Mario Kart DS onwards, the slippiness of snow tracks have been toned down a lot, and it's now much easier to race on and enjoy snow tracks. The snowmen on the road are now way less annoying obstacles, as they have been placed in much better positions, and if you do crash into one, you aren't going to be stunned for a ridiculously long time. Frappe Snowland on DS is a decent improvement over the N64 original, but there's still not a lot going for this track aside from its snowy theme. Desert Hills. This is our desert track for Mario Kart DS, and I'm not too hot on this one. The track starts out okay, with you drifting around an oasis, then you get up to a more open section where you need to avoid the pokies, but then you make it to this last section of the track where you have to take a ungodly amount of sharp turns to the finish line. I dread this part of the course. Maybe because I'm not a big fan of the drifting mechanics in Mario Kart DS, but still, I don't find this part of the course to be fun. It's only fun when you have mushrooms you can use to skip this section entirely. I like the Super Mario Bros. 3 inspiration when it comes to the theming, and the angry sun in the background that will occasionally shoot fireballs onto the road, but that last section of the course stops this from being a potentially good desert track. Moo Moo Farm. The 3-star tracks. Moo Moo Farm, in my opinion, is the perfect definition of a mid Mario Kart track. The layout is pretty simple, with it just being a big circle, and there's not a whole lot going on here aside from some bridges and moles to avoid on the road. Speaking of moles, the number of moles on the track for DS have been significantly reduced compared to the N64 original, which now makes this course even easier than it needs to be. I like the farm theme with all the cows, but this is still a pretty simple Mario Kart track. Yoshi Circuit. A track I liked a lot on the GameCube, but here on the DS, something feels off about it. Quite a lot of the background elements have been stripped out from this track, which is probably again due to the DS's hardware limitations, but it makes the track feel almost lifeless, with all the charm from the original track being sucked out from it. The secret tunnel shortcut has also been removed, which sucks, but hey, at least the track is still shaped like a Yoshi. That's something, right? Yoshi Circuit is still a good course to race on, but it's just not as special as it used to be. Luigi Circuit. This is actually a really good circuit course from the GBA, thanks to this track's layout featuring a good mixture of fun turns and straightaways. I've always found it pretty cool that it's raining on this course, because as of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, there have only ever been 2 different Mario Kart tracks where it has been raining. I'll try to let you guess in the comments what that other track is. The rain effect on this course has been toned down a bit, but I'm still glad it's here, as there's not many Mario Kart tracks with different weather effects within them, so it's quite a cool gimmick to include. Mushroom Bridge. So far, every GameCube game that has been brought back for the DS has received the downgrading treatment, and that trend continues with Mushroom Bridge. Don't get me wrong, this track has not been downgraded as badly as the other GameCube tracks, but the number of vehicles on the road have been significantly reduced, and 2 different shortcuts have been entirely removed. One was right at the start of a lap where you could shoot yourself out of a pipe, and the other really cool one was where you could race on top of the bridge. I'm not not going to lie, the removal of the second shortcut sucks a lot, as that was the most fun part about this track. The rest of the course still holds up pretty well, and even with my complaints, Mushroom Bridge is still good to race on. Mario Circuit. There are a lot of different Mario Circuit tracks across the series, but DS Mario Circuit might actually be my favourite one. As this is a circuit track, you would expect this to be a pretty simple course, and you are right, but there's a lot of elements that make this quite a fun course to race on. Lots of fun turns, piranha plants that shoot fire at you, a giant warp pipe you go through, and you get a nice view of Peach's castle in the background as well. This is still a pretty basic circuit course, but one that I enjoy a lot. Bowser Castle 2. There were 4 different Bowser Castle tracks from the GBA, and Bowser Castle 2 isn't my favourite one out of those 4, but it is still a pretty enjoyable and challenging track. There's lots of sharp turns, swamps to dodge, and a ridiculous amount of ramps on this course, although it is pretty fun to go over these ramps even without a trick system within Mario Kart DS. The atmosphere for this Bowser Castle is also pretty cool, and the music rocks too. Wario Stadium. There's a fair amount of different stadium tracks across the Mario Kart series, and Wario Stadium for DS is one of the better ones. There's a lot of ramps you'll be jumping over, boost pads to go over, rings of fireballs to go through, fire bars to avoid, and there's a huge mud section you have to avoid falling in. This is a pretty challenging course, and a very fun one too. Choco Mountain. I did not enjoy this course on the N64, but it's alright to play here on the DS. Not much has really changed, but because the controls in Mario Kart DS feel a lot tighter and sharper, it's much easier to control your kart and drift around lots of these tight bends, which makes you appreciate this track's layout a lot more. The elements of this course that were previously frustrating on the N64 are nowhere near as bad here on the DS. The boulders are now much easier to avoid, and it's very unlikely that you will end up falling off that cliffside section, which can easily take you into last place. I'm glad that this track was brought over into DS, as now I can enjoy it a lot more than I used to. DK Pass. Don't let the name of this track fool you, as this course has nothing to do with Donkey Kong. The only elements themed around him are the banners and sponsors, which is actually pretty funny. This is a very difficult track to rank, as there's nothing bad about this course, but there's also nothing memorable here either. There are a lot of snow-themed maps within Mario Kart, but DK Pass feels way too generic for a snow course, which can make it quite forgettable. The track layout feels good, the course is pleasant to race on, there's fun obstacles to avoid like giant snowballs, and even the music is nice to listen to, but there's nothing special here. Shroom Ridge. A course that looks pretty simple, but it's a lot more interesting to race on than you would first think. The road on this course is very thin, and there's 2 lanes of traffic on the roads. One lane of traffic is advancing forwards, and the other lane is coming directly towards you. It can be pretty difficult to avoid these vehicles on this thin road, and there's a lot of winding turns, which makes this a fun, challenging course to drift around whilst avoiding the cars. The theme of this course is kept quite simple, but I think this simple theme works quite well for this course, and I like that the race takes place on the cliffside as well. Delfino Square. This could be controversial, as I know a lot of people love this track, but this track has never clicked with me in the same way. I recognise that this is a great Mario Kart track, as it feels good to race on. There's alternative paths and lots of secret shortcuts to discover if you learn the layout of this course. The music is great, and I really love the Mario Sunshine inspiration for this track's theme. It's a very well designed course, but nothing about it gets me excited. This track goes for a more cozy atmosphere with its setting and music, which is a vibe I always appreciate, but Delfino Square just doesn't work for me. It's very difficult for me to pinpoint exactly why, but some potential reasons are because I'm not heavily nostalgic for Mario Kart DS like I am for the other games in the series. There's not a whole lot of gimmicks on this course, and part of my brain would have preferred a Mario Sunshine track that's placed directly within Isle Delfino, a much more bright and colourful location that I think would have appealed to me a lot more. Delfino Square is a great track, but it's just not for me. Cheap Beach. Moving on to our 4-star tracks, and we haven't got many of them this time around, but one of our 4-star tracks is Cheap Beach. This is obviously a beach themed course, but there's quite a lot of variety condensed into this course. You'll be racing along sandy beaches while drifting along the shorelines and avoiding crabs, but you will also start off the race by going across a broad walk section with a giant ramp at the end of it, and towards the end of a lap there is a short jungle section you go through as well. This is a very enjoyable course, and it's up there with some of my favourite beach tracks from across the Mario Kart series. Luigi's Mansion. I feel like this track should have been renamed themed, as if you are going to call your track Luigi's Mansion, you would expect most of the race to take place inside a mansion. However, in this course, 25% of the race takes place in a mansion, while the other 75% of it is in a spooky forest. Anyway, Luigi's Mansion is still a great track. The mansion section, although short, is my favourite part of this course, as you take some sharp 90-degree turns down a long staircase, and it's pretty cool to look at all the different paintings hanging up on the walls. The forest you race through is pretty good too, as this part of the course features some good turns, walking trees to avoid, a mini graveyard, and I love the spooky atmosphere this forest gives off. My only critique with this track is that within the forest, there is this section where the path is covered in a ton of mud, which is a bit tedious to race through, and I feel like this part of the course drags on for a bit too long. Apart from that though, this is a very strong track. Sky Garden. We are now onto our 5-star tracks, the best tracks in Mario Kart DS. And Sky Garden is also the highest ranked retro track on this list, and it fully deserves it. Sky Garden is my favourite track from Super Circuit on the GBA, and it's a prime example of a perfect Mario Kart track. The theming is unique, the track layout is excellent with lots of great turns, and there's a ton of opportunities for shortcuts, and the music is utter bliss to listen to. It's not a challenging track at all, but it doesn't need to be, as racing on this course is just incredibly fun. And thankfully, this DS retro course didn't get turned into a dumpster fire like some of the other retro courses in this game. Thank the Lord. Airship Fortress, a cult classic track from Mario Kart DS. Inspired by those airship levels in Super Mario Bros. 3, this is one of the most satisfying courses to race on, and there's a lot going on within this track. You start the race by avoiding bullet bills coming directly towards you, you board the airship and have to avoid the rocky wrenches enemies on deck, go below deck and avoid crates and moving fire burners, you then shoot yourself out of a ship's cannon into the fortress, race down the fortress, and then you are back to the starting point. There are a lot of different things crammed into this one course, and I love it. Bowser Castle. It's tradition that we get at least one Bowser Castle track in every new Mario Kart game, and DS's take on Bowser's Castle has some of the most original ideas incorporated into the track design. There's a lot of different moving parts within this Bowser Castle, such as rotating gears, moving rectangles, and this very long spinning tube thing. The track layout is designed very well, and there are lots of sharp turns, including this incredibly satisfying turn up the tower. And there's also lots of alternative pathways as well, some better than others. Like with this long spinning tube thing, if you fall off it, you have to take a longer path back onto the main course, but if you manage to stay on it and get to the end without falling off, you are rewarded with a good time-saving shortcut. This Bowser Castle also has lots of other things you would expect, like thwomps to dodge, fire burners, and plenty of lava you don't want to fall into. Bowser Castle DS is one of the most original Bowser Castle tracks in the series, and one of the most underrated as well. Rainbow Road. A new Rainbow Road track appears in every Mario Kart game in the series, and like with DS Bowser's Castle, I think DS's Rainbow Road is very underrated. I mean, this track has literal loop-de-loops. I don't think any other Mario Kart track has this feature, and it's so sick. The rest of the course is also fantastic. This Rainbow Road strikes the perfect balance between being challenging and not frustrating. There's a lot of other sections of the course where gravity is being manipulated and you are going through lots of twists and turns, and this course is incredibly fun and satisfying to race on. It sucks that a lot of people sleep on this Rainbow Road, as it's generally up there with some of the best Rainbow Roads in the series. Tick-Tock Clock. I'm not going to lie, it was really difficult to decide which order I should put my top 3 tracks in, as these remaining tracks are some of my favourite courses from across the Mario Kart series. I've settled with putting Tick-Tock Clock into 3rd place, a course with a fantastic theme taken from Mario 64. It's probably one of the best worlds in Mario 64 as well, so I'm very happy this was the chosen theme. Even if this course wasn't a direct Mario 64 reference, racing in a clock Racing in a clock is a pretty cool and unique idea, as you drive over shifting gears, avoid clock hands, dodge giant swinging pendulums, and you admire the rest of the clockwork machinery in this course. Racing on this course is always a blast, and Tick-Tock Clock has certified itself as a banger of a Mario Kart track. Peach Garden, coming in at the number 2 spot, is the most gorgeous track in Mario Kart DS. Peach Gardens is a course I love mainly for its flower garden theme, but also its atmosphere atmosphere and beautiful music. The course is quite simple as there's not a lot of challenging track design, but there are lots of different sections of this course that are really fun to race through. My favourite part of this race is when you have to drive through a more open section of the garden with multiple pathways, and you have to avoid the chain chomps roaming around. Lots of the turns on this course feel incredibly satisfying. You can use mushrooms to take shortcuts through the flower beds, and I also like the section towards the end of a lap where you have to avoid the Monty Moles. I love everything about this track, but it didn't quite make it to the number 1 spot on my list, and that's because the best track in Mario Kart DS had to be Waluigi Pinball. I'm aware that this is the popular choice everyone goes for, but come on, it's the most iconic track in the game. Waluigi Pinball doesn't take inspiration from any other Mario material. It's a completely original and unique idea, and the execution of this idea is perfect. There's bright neon and colourful lights all across the course, and there's plenty of bumpers, flippers, and giant moving pinballs to avoid. I also really like how the race starts with you launching yourself through a giant colourful neon tunnel up into the pinball machine. That's an excellent way to make a great first impression for this course. What's also really cool about Waluigi Pinball is that a lot of the sound effects that you would normally hear during a Mario Kart race have been swapped out for entirely unique sounds you can only hear on this course, such as the item pickup noise, the sound effect for hitting booster pads, and the sound which plays when progressing onto the second lap. That's a really nice small detail, and it really goes to show how much extra effort was put into making this amazing course. Waluigi Pinball does everything right. There's nothing at fault here. It's a fan favourite track for a reason, and it's also the best track in Mario Kart DS. And that's every track ranked in Mario Kart DS. But if you want to know how I ranked every track in my first Mario Kart game, Mario Kart Wii, then click on this video right now to find out.